We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 17a. On the previous summit, the Gemara is in the middle of a story where Rabbi Bar Chana is asked, let's say two people deliver a get, do they need to say B'faneinu nechtav, B'faneinu nechtam? And Rabbi Bar Chana said it is not required to say B'faneinu nechtav, B'faneinu nechtam. And in the meantime, a certain Chavra came. Rashi says Chavra is Parsoi. A certain Persian, seems to be a Persian priest. Shakla l'sharga mikamai, when he took away their candle while this incident was happening. And Rashi explains Shakla l'sharga sheyesh leparsia miyom eid shein madlikin or ba'oso yom ela bebeis avodah zara shelahen. The Persians, they have a certain day, a certain holiday where they're only going to light candles in their house of worship, in their house of avodah zara. And so therefore he took away the candle from Rabbi Bar Chana, who was explaining this halacha to the Rabbanan. And Omar, so he said, meaning Rabbi Bar Chana said, Rachmana o betulach o betula devar Esav. Either we should be in your shade, so to speak, or we should be under the authority of Esav. Rashi says, Rachmana o betulach o hechbiyanu betzilcha o higlinu betzel b'nei Esav shein mechavdin osanu. We should either be under cast under your protection, or we should be under the shadow, under the protection of Esav, meaning to say that the Bnei Esav would be better than the Persians. And the Gemara now says, Lemeimer, does that mean to say that the Romans are better than the Persians, that they treated the Jewish people better than the Persians? V'atani Rabbi Chia, but Rabbi Chia taught. My dichsiv, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk? This is a pasuk in Eov. Elokim haven darkov hu yadas makom hakadosh baruch hu. He understands its ways and he knows its place. The pasuk means to say Yodei hakadosh baruch hu b'Yisrael shein yecholnu lekabel gezeras aromiyim. Hakadosh baruch hu knows that the Jewish people will not be able to accept the gezeras of the Romans. So Amad v'higlo sam leBavel. So therefore he got up and he exiled them to Bavel, which was better treatment than under the Romans. And the Gemara answers, Lokash, it's not difficult. Hamekame denesu chavri leBavel. That was before the chavri, the Persians, came to Bavel. Halavasar dasu chavri leBavel. And that's talking after, meaning after the Persians came to Bavel, it was much worse. And Rashi explains, V'higlo son beBavel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu exiled them to Bavel, b'churban habayis, meaning with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Hamekame denesu chavri leBavel, b'mei kazdim Nebuchadnezzar, v'evel merodak, u'Balshetzer. In those times, during that time, Bavel was better. But Levasar dasu chavri mishakavesh koresh asamalchus, meaning from the time that Koresh took over, Umalach beBavel, and he ruled over Bavel, that's when things got worse. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Echad omer b'fanei nechtav, ushnayim omer b'faneinu nechtam kosher. At the end of the mission it said, if one says b'fanei nechtav and then two people say b'faneinu nechtam, so then it's kosher. Amar Rabbi Yami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yami says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo shanu ela shaged yotzei mitachas yad eid ksiva. This is only true if you have a situation where the get is actually being delivered. The shliach is the one who's testifying on the writing, the one who says b'fanei nechtav, denasu kishnayim al zeh kishnayim al zeh. Because then you essentially have two witnesses on the writing, because the shliach is considered like two witnesses, and then you have two actual witnesses on the signature, and so therefore it's kosher. Aval mitachas yidei eidei chasim apostle, but let's say the two people who are testifying on the signatures, if they're the shluchim, so then it's going to be puzzle, because then you do not have two witnesses on the ksiva. And the Gemara says, Alma, we see from this statement, Kasavar, that he holds, Shnayim sheviu get Medinas Hayam, Srichin sheyomru, b'faneinu nechtav, b'faneinu nechtam, that if two people bring a get from Medinas Hayam, they do need to say b'faneinu nechtav, b'faneinu nechtam, because here you have two people who are testifying on the signatures, they're both shluchim, and apparently there still is a requirement to say b'fanei nechtav, b'fanei nechtam. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rabbi Asi, so Rabbi Asi said back to him, Ela me'ata, but according to that, to Reisha de Katani, the earlier part of the Mishnah, which says, Shnayim omrim b'faneinu nechtav, yechad omrim b'fanei nechtam pasul, it says when two people say that before us it was written, and one person says, before me it was signed, so then it's pasul. Rabbi Yehuda machshir, Rabbi Yehuda says kosher in that case. There we have a machlokes tanoim, v'afilu get yotzi mitachas yidei shneim pasli rabbanan, so then you'll have to say that this is talking even in a scenario where the two people, they're both the shluchim, and still the rabbanan say that in that case, meaning the two people who say b'faneinu nechtav, they're both shluchim, and still the rabbanan say that it's possible in such a case. Amar le, so he said to him, yes, that is true. It's talking even in a situation where the two of them are shluchim. And Tosas explained, Amar le Rabbi Asi said to him, Ela me'ata, but according to that, Reisha de Katani, the earlier part of the Mishnah also, is talking about where you have two shluchim that are delivering the get. And Tosas explained, Kushid Rabbi Asi eina ela b'mai pligi. The real question of Rabbi Asi is that what is the nekudas hamachlokas over here between the Tanoim and the Mishnah, Kedefarishis Leil, as was explained earlier, Ela shelo chash laharach. But since this was already a sugi in the Gemara earlier, so the Gemara doesn't go at length over here, but really it's the same sugi here as it was earlier. And the Gemara continues, Zimnin Ashkechei de Yosef v'kamar, a different time he found that he was sitting and he was saying, Diafilu get yotzi mitachas yedei Eidei Chasima kosher, that even in a situation where it's the Eidei Chasima that are the shluchim at the very end of the Mishnah, so the two people who are testifying that they saw it signed in front of them, they're the shluchim, and so then in that case you really only have one person testifying about the ksiva, but it's still kosher. And according to that version, Alma we see, Kosavar Shnaim Sheviu get Medinas Hayom, Ein Zrichin Sheyomru B'fanenu Nechtav U'fanenu Nechtam, that if two people deliver a get from Medinas Hayom, there's no requirement to say B'fanenu Nechtav and B'fanenu Nechtam, and that's the explanation at the end of the Mishnah. And according to this version, so Amar Le Rabbi Asi, so Rabbi Asi said, Timela Me'ata, but according to that, Reisha Dekatani, the earlier part of the Mishnah, which said, Shnayim Omru B'fanenu Nechtav, V'yechad Omru B'fanei Nechtam Pasol, Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, you have a Machlokas Tanoim, let's say two people say B'fanei Nechtav, and one person says B'fanei Nechtam, the Chachamim say Pasol, and Rabbi Yehuda says kosher. Taima Deina get Yotzim Mitachas Yedei Shneim. You have to understand that the reason behind that Machlokas Tanoim is because you don't have two people delivering the get. Haget Yotzim Mitachas Yedei Shneim Machshir Rabbanan. But if the get would be delivered by the two of them, so then the Rabbanan would say kosher, because according to this version, when two people deliver a get, there's no requirement to say B'fanei Nechtav, B'fanei Nechtam. Amar Le. So in this version, he said back to him, yes, that is correct. And so then the Gemara says, Vazimnin lo amrit lan hachi. But the other time, you didn't say like this. So which one is it? When two people bring a get, do they have to say or not? Amar Le, so he said to him, Yosid he shelo tamid. This is a peg that should not be moved, meaning you should rely on the later thing, this later version, and the halacha really is that if a get is delivered by two people, so then there's no requirement to say b'fanei nechtav, b'fanei nechtam. And Rashi says, Yosid he lashon acher, achron ze emes. This later version, that is the true halacha. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Nichtav b'yom v'nechtam b'layla. Let's say the get is written during the day and it's signed that same day. Or B'layla v'nechtam b'layla, it's written at night and it's signed the same night. B'layla v'nechtam b'yom, or let's say it's written at night and it's signed that day. That's all the same calendar day. Kosher in those situations, in all of those situations, it's kosher. But the Mishnah continues, B'yom v'nechtam b'layla, if it's written during the day and then it's signed that night, a different calendar day, so then it's pasul, then that get is going to be pasul because the date in the get is different than the time of the signing. Rabbi Shimon Machshir, Rabbi Shimon says in that case it's kosher. Shayir Rabbi Shimon Omer, because Rabbi Shimon says, Kol ha-gittin shenechtavu b'yom v'nechtamu b'layla, all gittin that are written during the day and signed at night, psulin, they're all pasul, chutz mi gitei nashim, except for divorce documents, gitei nashim are an exception, and they are still going to be kosher in that situation. And the Gemara says, Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoraim. Mivnei matiknus man begittin. Why is it that they instituted that the date has to be written in a get? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishum Bas Achos. Rabbi Yochanan says it's in case of a situation where a person is married to the daughter of his sister, meaning if a person is married to his niece, and then there's a concern that the niece might have committed adultery, and now she's chayav misa, she's going to be put to death. So in order to cover it up, he'll say that she was divorced. So they instituted, in order to stop that, they instituted that the date has to be in the get. So we know from what point in time the woman is divorced. Reish Lakish says Misham Peiros, it's because of the fruits, and that's a reference to the fruits of the Nichse Melug. We have to know from what point in time the woman is divorced. At what point in time is she entitled to these Peiros? Reish Lakish, my time, Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara says, why is it that Reish Lakish doesn't say like Rabbi Yochanan? Amar Lach, he will say to you. And Rashi explains, Mivnei matiknus man begittin kaven de lav shtar de guvainu. The point over here is, it's not a document that's being used to collect anything, so why does it need to have a date? And so the first opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Bas Achoso v'yishto, again he's married to his niece, V'shem atizna tachda v'chasel l'shlo technak. So maybe she committed an act of znus, and he doesn't want her to get the punishment of chenek, the punishment of strangulation. The chosev la get below zman v'nosein la. So he gives her a get, it has no date, he gives it to her. Uchshemidin ala bebezin motzia gita v'omeres grusha isi upnuya bosasha. And when she's accused of the adultery, she'll take out the get and she'll say, I was already divorced at that point in time. And Reish Lakish says the reason is Mishum Peiros, because of the Peiros, Shemizman haget ve'elach, because the halacha is from the time of the divorce, of the get and onward, Im yimchor habal be'peiros nichsei milug shelo tigbim. So if the husband sells the fruits of the nichsei milug, that's property that she brings into the marriage, but he gets the fruits of that property. So in such a situation, if he tries to sell the fruits after the divorce, so tigbim, so then she can collect. Vim lo haya bozman, now if there was no date in the get, yem mocher v'holech, so then he could sell whatever he wants. And then when she goes to court to try to get those fruits back, so she will have the lower hand, because he'll just say to her, Kodem Gerish and Macharti, I sold it before the divorce. If you have no date, she won't be able to prove from what point in time she was divorced, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amud Beis.